Good evening, good evening. I just pressed the live button by accident, but I'm ready. So in this broadcast, I asked the question, do you want the good news or the bad news first, plus a message of hope? I've also just seen that Del Bigtree on the High Wire is live right now. If you're not familiar, Del Bigtree is an incredible broadcaster who's been challenging the narrative throughout this pandemic. So Del Bigtree is currently live on the High Wire, so I won't expect to see quite as many people joining tonight's live stream. But if you're not familiar with Del Bigtree, do check him out after this session. It's a bit like, if Coronation Street's on at the same time as EastEnders, I don't know, those are the things my mum used to watch. She used to be a Corrie fan at least. So, do you want the good news or the bad news? I'll start with the good news. So, in this video, I'm going to give you an update following a video I shared last night. I shared a video yesterday evening talking about the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill that was due to be debated this morning and throughout the day in the Houses of Parliament, which happened today. Now, for those of you who didn't see that broadcast I shared last night, it was actually, thank you to everyone who did watch that and share that. That was shared by over 5,000 people, and close to 60,000 people watched that video that I put out last night. So I really want to thank everyone who saw that and shared that video, because a lot of action was taken on the back of that. Loads of emails were sent to MPs and the Speaker of the House, so much so that the Deputy Speaker of the House, who was actually in receipt of those emails, actually emailed one of the respondents saying, where are all these emails coming from? So at least she was fully aware of the severity of the situation, so impact was made. So I suppose in some regards that's the good news. But just to give you a very quick précis of the situation, the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill is an extraordinary piece of legislation. I described it in my video as the most shocking piece of legislation that I've ever seen, which gives sweeping powers to the government and its agents to commit serious crimes against any of its opponents. Serious crimes without limit, so without any limitation. So there is no bounds that does not prevent any government or its agents to commit crimes including murder, torture and sexual offences. There is no limit to the crimes they may commit, which is quite bonkers to me. In fact, the Labour MP Zara Sultana stood up in the House and gave a lengthy speech stating that the bill itself is the most rapid and frightening descent into authoritarianism that this country has ever seen, and I echo that sentiment. Basically authorises conduct by officials and agents of the government and the security and intelligence forces. It gives them full permission to commit crimes, including up to and including murder and torture, which to me is completely unethical, unacceptable. So this was being debated today. It's a very much rushed through bill. It's ill thought through, and it basically gives governments and its agents the license to kill. It gives disproportionate power, and its power extends to parts of the government you would not even believe, including the Competition and Market Authority, the Environmental Agency, the Food Standards Agency, the Gambling Authority. Why on earth would any of these authorities require the ability to commit any form of crime, let alone any crime that has no limit, including murder and torture? So this morning, this bill was due to be heard, and the reality is we insisted through the campaigns that we put out there yesterday that there were a series of amendments, and thankfully the good news, starting with the good news, greetings to everyone. I've just seen Dr. Adil there, good evening to you. Dr. Adil is the founder of the World Doctors Alliance, by the way. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here. So the good news is these amendments were tabled. There was a whole list of amendments because this bill itself gave such sweeping, damning and dangerous powers to the government authorities without limit. But not only that, we were asking that it was amended so that it protects and limits against certain types of crime. We insisted that we didn't want to see it. We wanted to see it limited by murder, torture, and sexual offences, because we believe, well, at least the people that watched last night agreed that these things are just simply not permissible. When is there an excuse to use that in a government agency? And we asked them to raise the bar, because at the moment it's ambiguous in terms of when this can be used. They've stated in the interest of national security, which is completely vague. They've stated in the purposes of preventing crime and preventing disorder, which again, completely vague. And we've had a long history of the free speech and the human right of peaceful assembly and protest. There's many issues that humanity are obviously going to disagree on and want to stand out about, but if it causes disorder, now they have sweeping powers to commit crimes, to dissolve that disorder, which is deeply concerning. And then lastly, in the interest of economic well-being in the UK, and when would it be appropriate to commit a crime to protect the economic interests of this country? I'm completely bemused. So this is a genuine bill. If you just joined us, it's called the Covert Human Intelligence Sources Bill, and it would pass the first stage last week, I believe, or the week before, and entered into the second and final phases of parliamentary debate today. So the good news is, starting with the good news, the amendments that we suggested, the protections in terms of limiting by types of crime, including restricting murder, torture and sexual offences, etc., was heard. The good news is the limitation in terms of who can use this was heard, and then the limitation around the specific use cases was also heard. The bad news is every single amendment that was posed whilst it was heard and tabled and discussed, every last one was voted down. Every single amendment was voted down. So what this means, sadly, is this crazy authoritarian, unjustified use of power, abuse of power has now moved to the next and final stage with the House of Lords. So the final say on this incredible bill goes to the House of Lords. They are our final hope in terms of the parliamentary process. Now, when I broadcast this last night, people were shocked because the truth is the mainstream media, whilst they have in part reported on this damning piece of legislation, there's been very, very little coverage. You would expect a piece of legislation of this magnitude to be on the front cover of the newspapers, to be on the news headlines, on 6 o'clock on the dot. No. With been very limited reporting. This piece of legislation could potentially give these sweeping powers to the government and its agencies to commit crimes against its people, its opposers. And for me, when I look at the tragedies we've seen in history where government have committed offences against their own people, it's never ended up particularly well. And this is a form of protection, whilst I very much agree with the fact that we need to give our agencies in the United Kingdom, our security agencies, proportional and relevant powers to protect the nation and its citizens. But to do so must be lawful in my eyes. If you expect the public to behave lawfully, then surely those who set the laws must also behave lawfully. So I am very disappointed to see this bill go through to the final stage, and can only hope that there is some sense in the House of Lords to table these amendments and to see them pass, because I do very much agree that we do need to see our agents of security having certain powers, but they must have limitation, and they must be used in only appropriate, clearly defined scenarios to specific ends. At this point in time, it's a clearly blank stroke bill which can give the government and all of its agents extraordinary powers to commit crimes against its own people, which is a deeply concerning threat in the world that we live in right now, particularly as one of the key stipulations is in the interests of national security. And throughout history, we have seen countries that have been tortured by dictators constantly use this threat of national security as a dangling weapon of fear to keep its citizens in a state of panic and uncertainty. And we're at a time in history right now where that very fear is being used across the globe to keep its citizens of this planet in fear. Now, this is deeply concerning, because if you have that level of power and you are saying that you can cause crimes against your own people in the face of the national interest of national security, then right now, in this point in time where there's a lot of unrest in society, there's a lot of unrest, MPs are resigning, police sergeants are stepping down, you've got mayors pushing back against the government, you've got civil resistance. Of course, there is a pandemic going on, and there's, if you watch any of my videos, I've spoken at length about my views on those things. But the reality here is anything that the government does should be proportional to the threat, and to give these sweeping powers is a deeply concerning and dangerous time. Now, I said there's good news and bad news. Well, the good news is I said that the amendments were at least heard. That's a step forward. But my faith in democracy is eroding, quite frankly, as fast as our liberties are in this nation. And it is a deeply concerning time. These are extremely dangerous powers that have been put forward. And, it's now down to the House of Lords to make the final decision. And, the movement will continue. Now, there is some good news. There was some strong resistance today. There were a number of Labour MPs who actually stood down today. I'm trying to find my notes so I can give you the specific names, because it's quite an important issue here, because it's really important to recognise those who have stood up against these sweeping powers. But it is deeply concerning as the kind of our freedoms and our liberties are eroding, and now these sweeping powers are coming in, which are desperately frightening in terms of what it enables the government to do. So, sadly, unfortunately, Labour, who are the opposition at this point, were, quite frankly, part of the reason why this bill was able to continue, because Keir Starmer ordered his MPs in the third hearing to abstain from voting. So we're in a situation here where you've got one party, the Conservatives, putting forth such a frightening bill, but then you also have the opposition, the Labour Party, standing up saying abstain from voting. Now, despite his ruling of his ordering his MPs to abstain, 34 of them nonetheless opposed this bill, and 3 of them have resigned, including Dan Corden, who is the shadow Treasury Minister. He's also the MP for Liverpool, Walton, and of course they're going through a very difficult situation at this moment in time. Margaret Greenwood also resigned. She's the Schools Minister, and Navindu Mishra, MP of Stockport, also resigned. Now, Dan Corden left emphatically, sent a very clear message through his letter of resignation, and he said it's a matter of his own conscientiousness. It's a matter of his own conscience. And my question is, where is the conscience of the House right now as you vote in favour of this bill? There is a couple of individuals within this government which I believe are deeply concerning and very dangerous individuals. They are Priti Patel and Matt Hancock, who I'm sure most people are aware. Now, there is a number of reasons potentially for this. There have been studies throughout history, psychological studies throughout history, which examine how leaders behave under circumstances of fear and uncertainty, and it leads to extreme authoritarian-style leadership. They may, under normal circumstances, be perfectly rational, caring, loving individuals, but when under pressure such as this, Professor Zimbardo did some fascinating experiments in the 1970s which showcased how extreme people can operate under fear. And what we're seeing, I could be wrong, but we're seeing this extreme leadership, this extreme power grab, this extreme measures to hold people in fear. And it's deeply concerning, especially when you're looking at sweeping bills just like this. Now, as I said, I wanted to share a message of hope. Firstly, that it is not all over. It's going to the House of Lords next. And of course, I said just a moment ago that my own faith in the democratic process is fading. It's eroding. I like to think that we can first start by trying to effect change through the official channels, by writing to our MPs and lobbying for a good cause. But I will honestly say I've now written 4 or 5 letters over the last 6 to 8 weeks to my MP here where I live in Bristol without a single response. And I've tweeted, I've written letters. As far as it goes, I've had 0 response on either channel. So how do I even know my concerns are being read? And as someone rightly said in this broadcast, it's very, very rare for MPs to actually read the legislation that they're actually voting upon, which is even more concerning given its magnitude. In fact, I remember that the landmark case, I sadly forget her name, but there was a young lady. It's a fascinating story, how she was at a music festival and someone took a photograph up her skirt at the festival. She went to report it to the police and they did absolutely nothing about it, and they told her to, it's one of life's lessons, which I believe it's not a valid response from the police around someone who's feeling A, violated, and B, threatened in an unacceptable manner such as that. But it took her 2 years of fighting and fighting and fighting to make it an illegal act for someone to take a photograph up someone's skirt. That's surely common sense. but it was taken to the Parliament, and one MP voted against it. And when they questioned him, she went and asked him after the trial, after the hearing, and she asked him, "Why did you vote against it?" And he simply said, "I hadn't read the bill." It's not acceptable. It is not acceptable for our MPs, who are supposed to be acting in the interests of the public, to go into any parliamentary debate not knowing the basis of which they are voting upon. And in my mind, these types of powers that have been granted to our government is unacceptable. This is deeply concerning. We've all got concerns about what's actually happening around the pandemic. People are in fear, understandably. We've had a one-way narrative for 7 or 8 months. People are afraid. It's understandable. But we need to make people feel confident and certain and safe again, rather than putting forward such motions at this, which is capitalizing on the situation, grabbing more power, and taking advantage of the situation for your own political and power gain. This is simply unacceptable. In the United Kingdom, I am so disappointed. I'm so disappointed to see the powers of democracy eroding around us, and I honestly am deeply concerned. But as I said, we have to hold out hope for the House of Lords. But the really important thing is to recognise here, and it's easy to be frustrated and upset about what's happening. I'm deeply upset about what's happening. The bill may or may not get passed. If it does get passed, it's not game over. It's not game over. There is a lot of things happening right now in the United Kingdom and around the world that the citizens are simply not happy about. People are dissatisfied. I had a great conversation with a dear friend earlier on, and when people are afraid, it's very difficult to seek the kind of information that can make them feel certain again. It's very difficult for them to perhaps see the logical argument around things, and that's totally understandable. People are in fight or flight right now because of the situation that they found themselves in, none of which is their fault, because it's a constant repetition of this fear-based narrative that has left people feeling deeply afraid, and people don't know where to turn. We need to make people feel safe and comfortable again. But what I will say here is that it's not over. Even if this bill gets passed, this is one thing amongst many which need tackling. This decade is a real opportunity for us to put things right and to create a better place for the people on the planet, and together we can create that change. I do believe we are at the dawn of a real shift in terms of how the world operates. This, to me, feels like a final grab of power from those who have stood over time and operated in a way that is no longer suitable for the modern world. To me, there is an old way of thinking, an older consciousness that is no longer suitable. The same level of thinking is not the same level of thinking that's got us into this situation, is not the same level of thinking that will get us out of this. I do believe right now that there is millions of people around the world that are seeking change. They are frustrated and tired of politicians, those in power, big business calling the shots, and I think there is a real turn happening right now, and this is a final grab of power from those who have the old mindset, the old way of thinking, the old paradigm, and I do believe that we, the people, will create a more effective and modern world in the shell of the old, because we've evolved and evolved and evolved. Technologies have moved at such a pace, and the old methods and systems of thinking are simply not acceptable in the modern world, and things are changing, and there's this final grab of power clinging on to the old way of life. However, the people around them are changing. The new generation coming through are changing, and they demand, like myself, demand more, and we want to create a better world for the people on the planet. And it's down to us to do that. We cannot allow those in power to claim the power. We hold the power as the citizens of the nation. We hold the power of the citizens as the world, and we must demand better. But we cannot place all our power outside of us. We, the people, have to take the power. And there's so many different ways now. As I mentioned, there's so many different ways for us to create change. We've tried lobbying the MPs. If that doesn't work, we've got to keep doing that. There's multiple channels. We keep doing that. We lobby the MPs, we lobby our mayors, the councillors, the business leaders, the police. We've just got to keep that piece moving. We've got to keep that going. We need to educate and help people become aware, because right now, if the mainstream media aren't reporting on it, there's going to be a new wave of citizen journalism, people like myself who are picking up their cameras and their phones and telling this truth, to tell the stories of what's going on in the world so that other people can see, because we cannot put our faith in the mainstream media to do that. So we must educate people, keep people aware, continue to lobby, There's petitions, there's legal challenges, there's class action suites, there's lots of things going on, but ultimately we always have the power of protest, rallies, strikes, civil disobedience. We're seeing acts of civil disobedience happening right now. We're seeing business owners saying, I will not shut down. There's a gentleman up in Liverpool, he's had the police knocking at his gym door day in, day out, fining him up to £10,000 for keeping his door open. He is standing up to them. He's got press attention all around the world saying the gyms must remain open. This is an act of civil disobedience that can create change. It's simple acts of disobedience throughout history where people have been bold enough and had the courage to stand up and say no that creates change. But we cannot allow these dangerous things to happen around us and remain silent. We have to be on our feet, we have to have a voice, and we have to be heard, and we have to take action. There will be protests over the next few weeks and months. There will be an opportunity for the citizens of this country and beyond to participate in rallies and to step up and make their voices heard. If the government and the politicians and the MPs won't listen to the people through the letters and emails they're receiving, then they're giving the people no choice but to continue to speak out and make their voice heard, no matter how that occurs. So there's simple forms of civil disobedience. We've seen it today. MPs handing in their resignations. We've seen MPs and we've seen mayors saying, no, we will not shut down. We've seen today Andy, I forget his surname, Andy Burnham, I think, in Manchester, the mayor of Manchester, saying no, we demand better. The public have a voice, and it's a known fact. Every successful kind of civil resistance movement throughout history has required no more than 3 to 3.5% of its population to be successful. In the UK, that's around 2.5 million people. And I can tell you from watching what's been going on social media for the last month, that there is way in excess of 2.5 million people who are frustrated in the United Kingdom right now and demanding better. So we must remember that the people hold the power, and we must continue to make sure our voice is heard, because at this moment in time, we're not being loud enough, and there needs to be more volume, and we need to pump up the volume so that the people in power can hear what the people of this country and the world want, because together we can create a better future. We must remain focused on solutions. We're very much aware of the problems. They're rammed down our throats every single day in the press, but we need now to focus on positive, peaceful solutions so that together the people can come together and actually create a better world in the next decade, full of love, compassion and kindness, and restore a sense of livelihood that brings people back together again and restores our rights and our freedoms, and actually use that as a foundation and a building block in order to create change. Now, the reality is that the more the people push back, the more the government will push back. But there will come a point where the government hit a tipping point, because day in, day out, they are doing things that are more and more extreme, and it's becoming more and more alarming to more and more people. So actually the government, by virtue of their own actions, are alerting more and more of the human race around the challenges that they are facing by virtue of their actions. So the more we push, the more they push back, the more extreme they get. Unfortunately, we will see that more people will recognize what's going on. But we must remember, it's very easy to say it's their fault. It's very easy to blame other people. The moment we do that, we diminish our own ability to create change. We're incredibly powerful people. We have a beautiful human spirit. We're deeply resilient as a human race. And when we work together to tackle common challenges, then we can prevail. If we do things with ethics and morals and love and kindness and compassionate and have respect for each other, we can create positive change. This is a challenging and testing time. Of course it is, but we must hold out hope. We must hold out hope, because we can and will create change. So it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time, but it's a time of a great opportunity, and it's up to us to create change. There is many different things that we can do. If we're frustrated by the way in which the pandemic has been run, then we can create people-powered groups. We can invite the world's foremost scientists to form pandemic response teams and pledge our allegiance to those groups. We can actually create new forms of what we're looking to see in the world. We can see, some of the challenges right now in the world are coming from the World Health Authority, the World Health Organization, sorry. We've had a lot of challenge with them as they've descended into a more political realm over the years. They've become greater and greater at the greater mercy of outside private investment. So there's nothing to stop a new global health authority to form and for them to lobby each nation to say, we're here to not only prevent human tragedy, but we're here also to ensure human health. We need to build new solutions. We need to build new solutions to the world's problems, because the moment we let go of our own ability to create change, then we stay silent and we live with what happens. We have the power to create change. Each one of us has immense capability. If you ever forget that, just look yourself in the mirror and recognize what a miracle you are as your heart beats and the blood pumps through your body automatically, day in, day out. The miracle of life is within all of us, and we're deeply powerful as individuals, but we're even more powerful as a collective when we come together for a common good and do things to create a better world. So whilst it's deeply frustrating today to see what happened in the Houses of Parliament, to see this bill progress to the final stage, if you've missed the conversation so far, then you can go back and listen to what I've said here. But the truth is, we have to remain hopeful, and we have to come together. And to be honest, whilst this pandemic has affected the entire world, it's only recently that more and more people are starting to ask questions. And the most powerful thing that we can do at this very moment in time is to ask questions, because when we ask questions, we begin to make different evaluations, and when we make different evaluations, we can make different decisions. Now, the quality of our questions determines the quality of our answers. We just got to start asking better quality questions and ask others to ask better quality questions. When I watched the parliamentary debate today, there was a lack of clear understanding of what was being discussed. So we just need to ask the right questions to enable people to recognize that they need to find better answers. And if they don't have the answers, then they shouldn't be voting on something that they don't understand. So it's really important now that we ask questions ourselves, but ask questions of each other, because only by doing that do we make different evaluations and we make different decisions. So I want to send a message of hope. Don't lose faith. We have to retain faith. We have to trust that good will prevail. Whilst there may be external agendas and whatnot, that can't stop us. People will always have their aims and aspirations. People will always have agendas. But if we allow that to disrupt our way of thinking, then we'll never create change. We have to create our own change. We have to take responsibility ourselves and work together to affect towards a common goal. So stay hopeful. Watch this space. I myself am working on a number of digital initiatives. Just this evening I was finishing the final touches on a piece of information for a new website I'm launching called the Pandemic Podcast with my Elevate Live program. For those of you not familiar, I ran a program at the beginning of the lockdown called Elevate Live. We reached over 100,000 people, sharing inspirational content every single day to keep people engaged and uplifted. But now we're coming to Shend. We're inviting some of the most esteemed doctors and scientists from around the world. Dr. Adil, who was on here a minute ago, he's still here actually, the founder of the World Doctors Alliance. We'll be inviting some of the very best doctors from around the world to come and share the facts around the situation. We're inviting scientists from around the world. We're inviting human rights experts, economists, all kinds of experts from around the world to come to the Pandemic Podcast to share the actual facts and to enable people to make more informed decisions for themselves. Because without that information, it's very difficult to come to a common understanding, and information is vital. So it's by questioning everything that we find the answers, and it's part of my prerogative to try and find ways to educate people through digital media. And we also have a couple live events coming up, again online, I won't say too much about right now, but again, it's a very powerful means in the digital world that we live, where we can actually reach a lot of people to affect change and share really powerful information. So I really want to thank you for watching. Keep the faith, and thank you again for sharing last night's video and for sharing this one. Really do appreciate you tuning in, and keep the faith. Together we'll change the world, and I'll say good night, peace and love for now. Ciao.